Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, more protests over the exclusion of English-speaking children from an Afrikaans school in South Africa. Demonstrators accuse the institution of racism. Also, we hear from a Namibian Herero chief about his hopes for his people's latest bid to take Germany to court over colonial genocide at the start of the 20th century. And I'm joined by Uche Pezard, a Nigerian luxury and fashion strategist who's gathered together some of the biggest creative success stories from across Africa in a bid to help clue in luxury brands on how to tap into what African clients want. But first, there have been more demonstrations outside of an Afrikaans school in South Africa on Thursday, with protesters demanding the admission of 55 English-speaking pupils who were previously denied access. Riot police also clashed with protesters in Nigerian over the controversial school policy last week. Parents are accusing the Hoërskool Offerfall institution of racism. Afrikaans is mainly spoken by white South Africans. Well, Jane Flanagan joins us now with more. Jane, how far has South Africa come since the end of apartheid if we're still seeing wrangling like this over the use of Afrikaans in schools?
Yes, indeed. But we can trace this sort of conflict back to the Soweto uprising more than 4 decades ago. It just seems this issue is not going to go away. It is such an incendiary issue in South Africa, the use of Afrikaans. We have 11 official languages in South Africa, and Afrikaans is protected under the Constitution as much as any of the other languages that are spoken by Black South Africans. But for so many Black South Africans, Afrikaans has painful connotations as the tool, the instrument of oppression, of humiliation when it was being used in schools during apartheid. And so it is so difficult for so many Black South Africans to embrace it and recognize it as having any legitimacy. For white South Africans, particularly those the descendants of the early settlers, for them, Afrikaans really is so important culturally, and for every week they complain that there's further assault on their way of life, their culture. That these schools where only Afrikaans is taught seem to be very, very held very dear, seem to be very precious to these communities, and any sign that they are going to come asunder really leads to these sort of scenes we're seeing today that we've seen all week. But of course, at the end, it's the children who are suffering. This school is closed today. Other schools have had to close in the area because their teachers are now protesting outside this institution, which really has become a metaphor for where South Africa is at the moment, and increasingly continues to be so divided by language, and particularly Afrikaans. It's an issue that you can't really see that it's going to come to any resolution very soon at all.
Thanks very much. Jane Flanagan there for us. Well, on Thursday, a US court heard a lawsuit against the German government over demands for reparations for the genocide of 80,000 ethnic Hereros in Namibia at the start of the 20th century. Descendants of those killed have struggled to get this far, as Berlin has tried to ignore the suit. The plaintiffs face an uphill struggle, but their leaders say it's their duty to keep pushing for justice for the wrongs committed under colonization. Our correspondent sent this report.
Elected in 2014 as paramount chief of all Herero tribes, Chief Rokoro represents more than 300,000 people, all very attached to their culture. Chief Rokoro is a lawyer. He had to quit parliament to become a traditional chief, as he wanted to follow the footsteps of his spiritual father.
The bust at the Chief Hosea Kutako, father of African nationalism, UN petitioner.
The portrait of the first Herero chief to resist the Germans and ask for independence is for all to see in his home. Chief Rokoro is proud of his past.
We shall, just like our parents said, we shall die fighting. That's the commitment we have, that even if it takes us another 100 years, even if we have to sell the last Herero cattle, we shall do so that generations of our Hereros realize that the blood of our ancestors was not spilled in vain.
With his charisma, he has managed to unify Herero and Nama tribes. And despite the death of his friend and partner in the trial against Germany, both communities will be represented in New York in front of the Specialized Tribunal for Crimes Against Humanity. They want reparations.
Our land shall come back to our people.
And I have no doubt in my heart, and in the land of Abraham Lincoln, yes, in the land of liberty, justice will be done.
If Chief Rokoro succeeds, his perseverance will inspire other people in Africa and around the globe.
Well, be it fashion, jewellery or lifestyle, African creatives and entrepreneurs are on the rise in the global luxury industry. It's not only customers, but established big-name brands who hope to tap into the continent's potential, who can learn from the formidable style and expertise of a growing number of African designers and business people. Well, to talk more about this, I'm joined by Uche Pezard, who this week organised the Luxury Connect Africa conference here in Paris. It brought together African speakers and exhibitors to share their success stories and hopes for even more growth on the continent. So Uche, thanks very much for coming in to see us. Now, you're a lecturer and a business strategist, know the luxury industry inside out. I understand you're the CEO of the French company Luxe Core Group. Yes. Have you seen a growing international appetite for African creativity and the creation of international luxury goods?
Absolutely. First of all, thank you for having me. This is one of the most passionate topics that I love to discuss, so I'm happy to be here to talk about it. Africa has always been a source of inspiration for all segments of luxury, from fashion to beauty to jewelry. But I think what is happening now, it's really it's very interesting because in the last 5-6 years, that Africa has come into the discourse of luxury from an international perspective. Africa has always been looked at as a market, as a destination for consumption. So for distribution, because there is a wealthy class that is rising in Africa. But what we're trying to show is that the luxury economy in Africa, it's also being hugely impacted by the creative talent coming out of Africa. So rather than looking at Africa and Africans as a group of consumers who buy luxury products, which is, by the way, the truth, we're also trying to highlight luxury coming out of Africa through fashion, through beauty, through fine jewelry as well. And this is a reverse. This is something new. So luxury is not just going to Africa from the international market, but luxury is also coming out of Africa to the global market. And this, we're trying to push the two sides. So what we did in Paris this week was the first time that the world was actually discovering what African luxury really means. We brought together the best of African luxury, designers in fashion, in fine jewelry, in beauty, to showcase on a collective platform, to actually not just talk about it, but actually show it. So we consider them to be the pioneers, the ambassadors of African luxury, and they come from different countries in Africa.
So why for you is this connection between African culture and luxury so important? And what does it mean?
Yeah. Well, ultimately, when we think about luxury, luxury is cultural. Luxury is actually a culture. And the beautiful products and services that are developed by luxury brands are actually expression points of this culture. So if we buy a beautiful bag from Chanel, of course we're buying the design, we're buying the quality, we're buying the story of the brand, but in a way we're also buying the French culture. We're buying into a French culture. And so when we look at Africa, which has some of the oldest civilizations in the world, and which is actually responsible for some of the oldest luxury items. I mean, the oldest piece of jewelry that has ever been discovered by man is from South Africa, and it dates more than 3 million years. So luxury existed in Africa 3 million years, and it's attached to a specific culture. So when we speak about culture, I think Africa is one of the richest continents on earth in terms of culture and languages, and these cultures are beginning to inspire some of the designers that we showcased in Paris this week, like Imana Yisi, who is using, the kente from Ghana, and, the patterns from Namibia, from the Herero that you were just talking about. His last collection, which is being shown now, is actually inspired by the Herero women and their cultural heritage. So, culture is intricately linked to luxury, and we're trying to push the African culture to the world stage through design and creation in luxury.
Thank you very much. Uche Pezard there speaking to us a little bit about some of the inspiration to luxury products and goods from around the world that comes from Africa. That is, though, where we're going to have to leave it for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks for joining us. Do so again if you can. Take care.
Thank you.